Hello, friends. Welcome back to Grace with Finesse podcast. I'm Greg Achi, your host. As you know, in this podcast, we cover a wide range of subjects from leadership and management, self-care and well-being, to wholeness, healing, spirituality, faith, and lots more. Today, I'm excited to have a guest, Corry Yokley. Corry is a selfless senior manager in the DI space at Amazon. Corry, you're welcome. Could you please tell us something about you that most people don't know about? Most importantly, introduce yourself.
Sure. So thanks for having me, Greg. Corry. Something that most people don't know about me is that I used to have a deathly fear of deep water. When I was a kid, I could have sworn that my dad was trying to take me off this world several times, but the first time was when I went whitewater rafting with him and my brother, and we hit a rock and the boat flipped, and I was dragged down for 2 minutes, which all I remember was bubbles, and ever since then it led to this deep fear of deep water, and it shows up in how I view my stress levels. So sometimes when I'm overly stressed, I dream, and I dream in full color, and my stress level is at the most amount. I am at the deepest part of the ocean. When I am mid-level, I'm somewhere in between the top of the water and the middle. When I'm feeling okay, I am actually swimming, and I'm going through and I'm coming up for air. And I think maybe once a year I feel fantastic, and I'm like Jesus walking on water. And it's because of that where I love the ocean. I love to swim. I love the water. But this deep water analogy in my mind has always just been a really big fear. And so I did some hypnosis a couple years ago that kind of took me to the deepest, darkest part. And I found that it really wasn't the water that I was afraid of. It was the unknown or controlling a situation. And once I was able to come out of that, I have no problem with jumping in the ocean in a deep part of the water now. Yeah. But I had to face that fear, which was a very scary process to do. It took a couple weeks, but thank goodness I had a great therapist that was working with me on that. And then as far as my introduction of myself, so I'm what you call a child of the world. My parents were military, so grew up first 7 years of my life in Germany. My little brother was born there. Unfortunately, my parents divorced when I was around the age of 7, so my mom moved back to the States, and then my dad took us to, first stop was Arkansas. So I was raised by a man with 2 brothers, which makes for some very fun, interesting stories of growing up. But it also led to a different part of my mental health journey growing up, being a one-parent household, but also by a male figure. You don't really realize how much you need both counterparts until you're older. And then, going through self-realization, and of course, there's puberty and adulthood, just found that I had to make my own way, my own mental health journey, due to, some childhood traumas, but then, as an adult too, going through some difficult situations. I'm also a parent of a soon-to-be 16-year-old and raised her a good portion of her life on my own. And then moving over back to Europe with her when I was 30. And, some people would say, "Are you crazy? Are you afraid?" And I said, no, fear is just getting ready for something new, and it's a challenge. So I brought her here with a little fear in my heart, but ready for an adventure. And we've been here for 11 years now.
Wow. Thanks, Corry. Thanks for sharing. And I like the analogy, the what people don't know about you shared. I want to actually be in your place where you walk on the water. Talking about your mental health journey, I had some questions, some of them personal, but feel free to share as much as you can. I wanted you to share a bit about your personal journey on the mental health. How did it start, and where are you today on it, journey?
Sure. My first episode of this journey started, I think, when I was around 8 years old, because my parents divorced at such an early age.
Early.
Yes. One of the things that I do praise my father about is he recognized that something was wrong at a very young age. So immediately after my parents divorced, I stopped talking for a year. Just didn't want to talk. I was so angry. I just couldn't find my voice in the situation. And I felt so abandoned by my mom because as a child, you see something that you don't really comprehend, but you think you're being abandoned by, excuse me, your main caretaker. And then as an adult, you find out that's not the case, but you take a snapshot of something in you and it stays with you. And in my case was a snapshot of my mother walking away and leaving. And so with a suitcase in her hand. So when I grew up, I had a deep fear of abandonment. But then I also grew up with my father who, based on his upbringing, did not have the best hands-on approach when it came to raising a young girl, but also just talking about his own feelings and emotions. He was not raised that way. And so there was a lot of aggressive discussions because he was in the military. He was always away. And then it was me and my brothers. Sometimes we would stay with family members. But I remember he took me to the therapist and said to her that I'm not talking and we want to find out what's going on. And for the first time ever, I started talking to this person through journals and only in that space because she gave me the space to just be. And that was my love of journaling because then I could write books and poetry and no one could stop me and live in my own world. And as I got older, I started to see that I viewed things differently. Attention span is short. I daydreamed a lot. I would get angry, but not my anger would build. And it would just be like a brick wall, layers of bricks, building and building. And every once in a while, I would have this huge explosion, like with probably one of my brothers or my dad. And it would be fierce and aggressive and even violent because I just couldn't contain myself. So take that a couple years, into young teenhood. And I finally thought I had a name for, not really a name, but I had it under control. So I just became more meek and quiet. And then maybe too quiet because then some other things happened where when I was 16, there was a big change in my life that I won't say because it will cause some harm to my family, but something happened where it caused me to even grow to be more quietly aggressive. And I can explain what quietly aggressive is later, but that it changed me forever and it caused a lot of deep hidden anger and I just buried it. But it made me feel like then going into the world of an adult woman, I will treat men a certain way because of this situation, because of what happened, how my dad raised me, because of how I saw myself, and the value I had of myself was not very much at the time. And so that changed into going into young adulthood, going to university, still not sure of who I am and where I belong. And again, just a lot of anger and mostly towards men. Just never really found out what to do with that anger until I got out of university. And then I started seeing a therapist because I put myself into some situations that I shouldn't have. And, I didn't see that I was being reckless and careless. You're young, you're stupid, you think you're indestructible, but that's not logical. So, my mom caught me and said, you need to slow down. You need to think about yourself and how you treat yourself and how you see yourself. And I just didn't see the value in me at the time because, I had been raised to be a certain way. And I was told, big girls don't cry. I was told, you don't need to, I'm going to raise you so you don't need a man to depend on. You can take care of yourself. So I had this strong woman dialect in my head where I just hold my breath and walk through it.
Right.
And so that's what I was until, actually was that way until I had my daughter.
Yeah.
And that's when the real work began.
And Corry, I will interrupt you there because you talked a lot about anger, which seems to be underlaying here. Mm. How do you manage the anger? Because most people going through mental health, journey have also issues of anger, angry with a colleague, angry with a brother, angry with a spouse. How do you manage that anger?
So the first thing is to identify the anger, and unfortunately, I held anger for 30 years. That's an unhealthy relationship with anger. So I started going to the gym and I started boxing because I thought, let me take my anger out on an inanimate object that I'm not going to hurt, but I feel less stressed. So I walk away from the bag and I feel light and easy and I go to sleep. But I'm still angry. It still sits in me. I tried talking about it with a therapist, with loved ones, addressing my anger. Like, for instance, with my father, it took many years, but then I told him how I felt that he wronged me and how it shaped my relationships with men, and he acknowledged it. It was really hard at first because he didn't understand it. He thought he was just doing the best that he could, which in his reality is true. My dad is a damn fine man. He's a great father. He just was raised in a different time. And so that anger I had to address with him. And now my dad is like one of my best friends. And I think I'm his best friend.
Awesome.
But then just recently, I went away to a retreat where I learned that anger can be positive. And if you address it the right way, anger can help you get through many things. If you're feeling angry, let's say about something going on in your relationship, rather than walk away and hold it, sit down and tell that person how you feel in the moment. If you need to walk away and breathe and then come back, you should still address it. If you're feeling angry at work, you should relax, go for a walk, drink some tea or some water, and then come back and address that issue in a calm, professional manner. If you're angry with your kids, because sometimes I know I blow my top, a lot of times you just have to sit down and explain to them in the most logical sense, I am a human as well, and I too have emotions, and I need you to understand where I am right now, when they're of age to understand. Because you don't need to hold all that anger in. Your body doesn't deserve that, because it is a form of self-hatred and abuse.
Correct, yeah.
But to know that anger is positive and you can use it in a positive manner is very empowering for me.
Yeah. So externalizing it, in cases, talking to the individuals, having a conversation with individuals, that getting it out of you because it's a very negative, it's very bitter. I mean, there's a story about a boxer. I don't know if you've heard this story, who had a very bad childhood, was abandoned by his father, and he's a very good boxer. He beats all his opponents with a knockout. And basically, when he was asked, how can you fight so fiercely and brutally, be so brutal with your opponents? And he said something in the line that when he gets into the ring, he pictures his father, his opponents, and he just goes after them. That's one way to be very negative about. Of course, he has made great successes.
Yeah.
But that anger is still inside of him. It's something he needs to externalize, get rid of it, to feel free. Thank you so much. You were talking about the retreat you just had, and I must say that, when I saw you first time after that retreat, you were really like walking on the water, to your analogy. Tell me about the learnings you had from that retreat and how it helped you.
Yeah, so the learnings from that retreat, there were many learnings. I have a whole journal on the day-to-day. It was 14 days of self-discovery, love. I won't lie to you, I cried probably no less than 3 times a day, but I needed to put in the work. So the background of that is I had hit a wall after a year and a half of struggling. I wasn't taking my meds for my depression and anxiety. I was not in a good space at home or at work. I was just struggling to find balance. And so my therapist was like, you need to take a medical leave, find a place to go away from home. And so I did some research, and then I talked to a few people and found out that this amazing place in Portugal, I believe it's called New Life Portugal. It's about a 2-hour drive from Porto, and it's like 800-meter high on the mountainside. And you go in and you let go of all that you're carrying. So first day, you leave your stuff in the room, and they tell you like you have what they call silence hours. So from 9:30 at night till 8:30 in the morning, you don't talk to anybody. There's no music playing. You don't mess with your phone. No electronics, no TVs in the room. And there's something freeing about leaving all that you're plugged into behind, and then staring out the window into a valley of greenness and blue skies and even rain. You your thoughts start to become more clear, and then you start to see a path in front of you. And every day we had community session. Then you would have your one-on-ones with your work coach, your therapist, or even a breathing coach. And that's what I also found was breathing techniques really do work. It may not be for everyone. And this is not like yoga breathing. This is like deep tantric breathing where you're like filling the air through your body and you're letting things go. So for instance, even doing, which I had done Tai Chi before when I was younger, but learning Qigong is like a form of Tai Chi, but it's not a martial art, but you're actually moving through the elements of earth, fire, air, wood. And as you move through your breathing with your hands and your body, you see aggressions and anger and things leave, and you bring in positive energy. You bring in life and the elements. And for me, that means everything, especially on the day-to-day. And the other thing was, like we talked about anger, realizing that anger can be positive. And how can you change that? And the other thing was self-love. I had also been very angry at myself, and without realizing, I thought I was angry at everybody, but I was like, actually, you're angry at you. Right. And you need to address you, and you need to say, there's a poem that they had us say. It's called a Pono poem, and it's a Hawaiian. I don't know how to say it in Hawaiian, but it is for yourself or to anyone that has wronged you. You would say, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, and thank you.
Wow.
And so when you say that to yourself, it's like, for me, it's I love me. I'm so sorry that I've put myself in this situation. Please forgive me, mind and body, and thank you for taking me on this journey and waking me up every day. So when I came home from my retreat, I said this mantra to everybody in my life that I either, were in good spirits with or that I was angry at, because I felt like I needed to make amends. And sometimes when I wake up in the morning and I'm having a hard day, I sit in the bed in the morning and I say it to myself before I get up.
Wow.
And it helps to alleviate some of the stress.
Brilliant. So basically, you talked about unplugging, which is important for all of us who are all connected and plugged in.
Yeah.
Self-discovery. By the way, I wrote a book on self-discovery.
Can't wait for that.
A few years ago. You talked about self-love. Most of us don't know love ourselves and kind of self-care as well, right? Releasing the anger. And I like the mantra, I love you. I'm so sorry. You forgive me and thank you. I guess we'll end with that mantra at some point when we're ending this podcast today. You talked a lot about your journey, which is very rich, to be honest. But I'm kind of wondering, being a Black woman, in the Black communities, how does a stigma around mental health impact individuals, and what can be done to to reduce this stigma in our communities?
Yeah, the first thing is to talk about it. Like, within the Black community, we are deeply rich in the diaspora, whether it's on the continent of Africa, in the Caribbean, or in the US, or the indigenous tribes, it is deep. And so if you take it back to the early existence, I would even say in the US we have that book Jim Crow that talks about how to break a black family, and that at itself is all a mind melding experiment of how to break yourself, your family, all by doing one or two things. And that trauma is carried in what we call our gene, how do we say, our bio cells. It lives with us hundreds of years down the line. We still carry this, and we see it every day. We try to break this habit because we just say, this is how my family is, this is how my ancestors were, so this is how I am. But what we need to do now is acknowledge if something is wrong. Say something is wrong. Say, I don't feel well today. Say, my body and my mind is out of sorts. I feel off balance. And respectful to those that practice, whether you're spiritual, Christian, Buddhist, or, even in the Wiccan world, I respect all levels of that. But what we need to acknowledge is when someone says, I need help, don't say, pray it away, just smile, get over it, or you're crazy, or you're making things up. By acknowledging it is the first step, and it's the hardest step for anyone to say, I need help. So if someone is confessing to you or giving themselves to you, say, okay, how can I help? And just listen. That's really what we need to do. But as a people, we tend to stigmatize, we tend to demonize it, and we ignore it. Whereas this new generation now, they are very emotional humans. They love to talk about their feelings. They're open and honest on social media about it, maybe too honest, too free, because some of this information is not for everyone. But as a community, we need to do better to support each other, and we really do need to go in the lines of, I am my brother's keeper, I am my sister's keeper, because without that, we will fall apart, we will fall to ruin.
Thank you so much. So, the truth about mental health especially is that, people don't, it's something, sometimes it's a taboo, people don't talk about it. But I can tell you, these are two black individuals, a black man and a black woman, talking about our journey through mental health. So it's important you accept where you are, seek support, and ensure that you have family support. And to your point, we should be our brother's keeper, supporting each other the much we can. Thanks, Corry. This one is kind of also near and dear to me because people are going through the journey, mental health journey, but there are some practices that could help. Some simple practices. What are the effective self-care practices that you have implemented for yourself, or that through your journey you have learned that would be useful to improve mental health for any listener who is out there?
Yeah, so the ones that I've carried with me throughout the years, my favorite is journaling. I have like a bookshelf full of journals from the last 15 years because sometimes I like to go back and read where my mind was. Find your favorite book that speaks to you and grounds you. So, for instance, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho is my favorite book. For any life-changing thing I'm going to do, I reread this book because it talks about self-discovery and self-journey and how to find your own personal treasure. Find something that grounds you and then means something to you and have that as a reminder. Exercise is always good. Running, walking. I love hiking because I don't feel like I'm running through the fields. I'm walking through it. I'm taking it all in.
Right.
And what I learned in my recent program was to lay in the grass and stare at the sky and do nothing. Just be. Mm-hmm. Really is the quintessential thing is to just be in the elements. Let the air run through you. Let that God's nature be with you. And you'll feel all the better for it. And also just find a good level of support. It may not be your partner, your husband, your child, your best friend. If you can get a therapist, that's always a great way to balance it. But you need someone very specific to your needs. A generic therapist will not get you there. You need someone who is on the level of, let's say, if your ethnicity, any mental challenges that you're facing, you can find someone specific to that in your region, and even in like as far as sexual orientation, like you can find someone very specific to your needs. And so those are a few of my favorite things to do.
Yeah, I like the point about exercise. And what I do actually, I do 2 exercises every day. One exercise, I call it exercise with nature, where to your point, I just, take a walk, can be a very easy walk and enjoy the nature. And then, later in the afternoon or in the evening, I do the real exercise, which, kind of like cardio or something to kind of, keep me healthy. But you talked about journaling and you talked about going back to read what you've written. And I've had conversation with some psychologists that don't recommend that because sometimes it's like going back to, to a dark place and stuff like that. How do you deal with that? Or what would be your thoughts around that?
I think for me, going back to it actually keeps me from going to a dark place, because if I feel like I'm on the cliff and I'm about to jump into the dark pit, I can go back and read something where I knew that it was far worse than what it is currently. And I'll say, I made it from there, and I'm going to make it from here.
Right.
And I don't go back and read it all the time. I actually just keep them on the bookshelf, and I just look at them, and one day maybe I'll burn them and throw them away. I don't know. But a lot of times I have some really good thoughts in there where I also just like to go back and read, some favorite poems that I've written, some quotes, maybe a good point that a friend or a therapist have told me, to help me, keep good memories and good mindset.
Nice. Okay. Thank you, Corry. You talked also about family members supporting mental health patients. How can a friend or a family member or a colleague even support a friend or somebody who is going through mental health?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times what people need is they don't need your advice. They don't need your what if. They just need you to listen. And that's really it. Just sit down, grab some tea or some coffee or water, get comfortable, and just listen. Let the person spill their soul out. And when they're done, if they need a pat on the back or a hug or, hey, I'm here for you, that's really what most people need, is just to be seen and heard.
Yeah.
And they don't need, well, if I were you, I should do. And that was something else I learned in the program, is when we would do community circles, they would say, listen, but do not give advice. And actually, by just listening, you are learning so much more for yourself too. Right. And you just learn to be more empathetic when you're listening to someone.
Right. Thank you so much. It's been very, very productive. I think we'll, because you touched on a lot of the items that will in itself be topic. You talked about daydreaming, you talked about journaling, you talked about self-discovery, you talked about self-care. All this could in itself be an episode in itself. So I'm looking forward to have you, this podcast again. Wrapping up, what would be I would say 3 top advice, you can give a listener who might be going through a mental health journey, or who have a family member, a loved one, a friend going through a mental health journey?
Top 3 advice. So I said this before, but yeah, to just listen is always good. Make space and time for that person. Because sometimes when people are going through it, they just need to feel like someone cares. And if you see or know someone who may do self-harm, like they're on the edge, don't be afraid to call the right people to get help. I've lost a few friends that way because it was too late. They just didn't open their mouths, or The worst thing is you get a call, or I have a family member who's like that too, and you get a call and there's nothing you can do, but because they didn't know that they could come to you, they didn't know they could ask for help, or the writing was on the wall, you saw it, but you're like, oh, it'll just pass.
Yeah.
But it didn't pass. So if you see it, get over the how do we call it, the bystander effect?
Right.
Do something about it, because you could save a life without even knowing it.
Thank you. That's very important. I've lost a friend as well, who everything signaled that he was going in that direction, but we were kind of, I think we were just naive and probably a bit of this stigma thing and all that, and probably also not knowing what to do. So if you're listening, dear, you have a friend, a loved one who have shown tendencies of self-care, get the person help, call the right authorities to provide the right help. So Corry, thank you so much. Really been a very, I would say, rich conversation. I wish, we could go, more deep into this conversation, but I think, like I said, we'll have you again on this, on the podcast. This is, I would say, one of many episodes on mental health, because it is a topic right in season right now that we need to talk about. Because I want to thank you for your time today and for sharing deeply from your heart. If you're out there, you want to connect with Corry personally, Corry is on Instagram at Corry Dutch. Is it Dutch or Doch?
Dutchy.
Corry Dutchy. It's spelled CORRYDUCHY. And Corry is very experienced in other areas as well. You had her talk about journaling, daydreaming, self-care, and also your mentor. You mentor a lot of people around the world. What also to mention that Corry is finalizing plans to launch a podcast. So this one will be a push to make sure she launches it, which she'll be hosting. So be on the lookout for that. Once it launches, I will also publish the link on my podcast. I want to recommend a video on YouTube by John Kabat-Zinn. I just discovered that today. He talks about it's a bit of a mental health and how you can release, empty your mind, kind of unplugging and emptying yourself. So again, thank you everyone who's been listening. If you have questions, you can always reach out to me on email or via Instagram. All the information are on the description. Until I come your way next time, be intentional with protecting your mental health. Have a great day, everyone.